Nzinga Mbanda was born in 1583. She was born into the royal family of Ndongo. Ndongo was a kingdom located in what is now Angola. Nzinga's father, Quilombo of Ndongo, was a powerful king. He ruled with wisdom and strength. Nzinga was a clever and curious child. She learned the art of war. She learned statecraft from a young age. She absorbed the wisdom of her elders. Nzinga grew up during a tumultuous period. The Portuguese had arrived in Ndongo. They sought to control the region's resources. This included the lucrative slave trade. Nzinga witnessed the devastating impact of the slave trade on her people. She saw families torn apart. She saw communities shattered. This early exposure to injustice fueled her desire to protect her people. It ignited a fire in her heart that would shape her destiny. Nzinga's father recognized her intelligence. He allowed her to participate in state affairs. This was unusual for a woman at the time. Nzinga excelled in these matters. She impressed her father with her sharp mind and her ability to command a room. Her destiny as a leader was slowly being revealed. She was a quick learner. She mastered the art of negotiation. She also became skilled in military strategy. Nzinga's early life laid the foundation for her future greatness. It instilled in her a deep love for her people. It also gave her the tools and experience she needed to become a formidable leader. She would need all her strength and cunning to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. The young princess would soon become a queen. She would become a symbol of resistance against colonization. Her name, Nzinga, would echo through the ages. The kingdom of Ndongo was a powerful and prosperous nation. It had a rich culture and a long history of independence. However, the arrival of the Portuguese in the late 16th century cast a long shadow over Ndongo. The Portuguese came seeking wealth. They were primarily interested in slaves. They established trading posts along the coast. They began to exert their influence over the region. Nzinga's father, King Quilombo, initially tried to negotiate with the Portuguese. He hoped to maintain Ndongo's sovereignty. He soon realized that the Portuguese were not interested in peaceful coexistence. They were determined to exploit Ndongo's resources for their own gain. They used their superior weaponry and ruthless tactics to expand their control. The slave trade became a major point of contention. Nzinga witnessed the horrors of the slave trade firsthand. She saw her own people being captured and sold into slavery. She saw families torn apart. She saw communities decimated. This experience left an indelible mark on her. It fueled her hatred of the Portuguese. It also strengthened her resolve to resist their encroachment. She vowed to protect her people from this injustice. The relationship between Ndongo and Portugal deteriorated rapidly. King Quilombo resisted Portuguese advances. However, the Portuguese were a formidable force. They had superior weaponry. They also had the support of rival African kingdoms. Ndongo found itself increasingly isolated and vulnerable. Nzinga's early life was shaped by this conflict. It was a conflict that would define her reign. Nzinga's path to the throne was anything but straightforward. She was not the designated heir. Her brother, Ngola Mbandi, ascended to the throne after their father's death. He inherited a kingdom at war. Ngola Mbandi was ill-equipped to handle the Portuguese threat. Ndongo suffered several defeats under his rule. Nzinga's sharp intellect and diplomatic skills became evident. She was her brother's trusted advisor. She recognized the gravity of the situation. She understood that diplomacy might be the only way to save her people. In 1621, Ngola Mbandi sent Nzinga to negotiate a peace treaty with the Portuguese governor. This mission showcased Nzinga's diplomatic acumen. The Portuguese governor expected a subservient ruler. He was greeted by a confident and assertive queen. Nzinga arrived in the Portuguese encampment with a calculated display of power. She refused to meet the governor on his terms. She demanded he meet her as an equal. Nzinga's bold move shocked the Portuguese. It earned her their grudging respect. She negotiated a peace treaty on favourable terms for Ndongo. She secured the release of Ndongo prisoners. She also obtained a promise from the Portuguese to recognise Ndongo's sovereignty. Nzinga's success in these negotiations elevated her stature. She was seen as a shrewd leader. She became a symbol of hope for her people. However, the peace treaty was short-lived. The Portuguese soon violated its terms. Ngola Mbandi, overwhelmed by the pressure, died in 1624. Some historians believe he was murdered. Regardless, Nzinga emerged as the only leader capable of uniting and defending her people. She ascended to the throne of Ndongo, ready to face the Portuguese threat head-on. The diplomat and the cross-strategic conversion and uneasy truce. Nzinga's reign began with a strategic masterstroke. She converted to Christianity. This decision was not taken lightly. It was a calculated move to gain a temporary advantage over the Portuguese. She understood the importance of religion to the Portuguese. She used it as a tool to further her own agenda. She adopted the name Ana de Sousa after being baptized. This conversion had a significant impact on Ndongo-Portuguese relations. The Portuguese, initially skeptical, welcomed Nzinga's conversion. They saw it as a sign of submission. They believed it would pave the way for their complete domination of Ndongo. They underestimated Nzinga's cunning. Nzinga used her newfound religious affiliation to her advantage. She used it to secure concessions from the Portuguese. She negotiated the release of more Ndongan prisoners. She also gained a temporary reprieve from Portuguese attacks. This period of relative peace allowed Nzinga to consolidate her power. It also allowed her to rebuild her army. The truce, however, was always fragile. The Portuguese never fully trusted Nzinga. They continued to encroach on Ndongan territory. They also continued to participate in the slave trade. Nzinga knew that war was inevitable. She was simply biding her time. She was waiting for the right moment to strike back. The kingdoms at war resistance against the Portuguese. The uneasy truce between Nzinga and the Portuguese eventually crumbled. The Portuguese, emboldened by their superior weaponry, continued to violate the terms of their agreement. Nzinga, realizing that diplomacy had reached its limits, prepared for war. She was a skilled military strategist. She was also a charismatic leader who inspired her people to fight for their freedom. Nzinga's army, though outnumbered and outgunned, was fierce and determined. They knew the land. They used guerrilla tactics to great effect. They ambushed Portuguese patrols. They disrupted supply lines. They made it increasingly difficult for the Portuguese to operate in Ndongo. Nzinga's resistance was not just a military campaign. It was a fight for the soul of her people. She understood that her people's culture and identity were at stake. She rallied her people. She appealed to their sense of pride. She called upon them to defend their homeland. Nzinga's resistance resonated throughout the region. She became a symbol of hope for those who yearned for freedom. Her defiance inspired others to take up arms against the Portuguese. Her name became synonymous with resistance. She would not be deterred. She would not be broken. A queen's alliances, Dutch partnerships, and guerrilla warfare. As the war raged on, Nzinga realized that she needed allies to defeat the Portuguese. She turned to the Dutch. The Dutch were also locked in a struggle with the Portuguese. They were eager to undermine their rivals. They saw an opportunity in Nzinga's struggle. In 1641, Nzinga formed an alliance with the Dutch West India Company. This alliance proved to be a turning point in the war. The Dutch, with their naval superiority, were able to provide Nzinga with much-needed military support. They supplied her with weapons and ammunition. They also helped her to train her army in more advanced military tactics. Nzinga, with her knowledge of the terrain and her use of guerrilla warfare, was able to effectively harass the Portuguese. She launched surprise attacks. She disappeared into the jungle. She frustrated the Portuguese at every turn. This alliance, however, came at a price. Nzinga was forced to make concessions to the Dutch. She granted them trading rights in Ndongo. This alliance, though controversial, was a strategic necessity. It allowed Nzinga to continue her resistance. It also helped to weaken the Portuguese grip on the region.